Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are waiting on just a few more participants to join us here on Zoom. Thank you for your patience. We'll get started here in a few minutes. Hello, everyone. We are now ready to get started. Commissioners, I am now turning on your ability to start your audio and your video.
Mr. Vice Chairman, our witnesses are here, so whenever you're ready, I think we can go ahead and begin.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Sean Varner, and I am the Vice Chairman of the Little Hoover Commission. I'm standing in place of Pedro Nava today, our chairman, who is unable to make it with us today. I'd like to thank everyone for joining our hearing today. First, I'd like to introduce my fellow commissioners who are on with us currently, Commissioner Bill Emerson and Commissioner Kathy Schwamberger. If others join later, we will introduce them as they come on board.
Mr. Vice Chairman, Commissioner Sidley is here as well.
Well, she is.
Yeah.
There she is.
Waving her hand at you vigorously. Yeah.
Oh, we have Commissioner Janice Sidley as well. How could I ever forget her? I got to change my view here so I can see everybody. So also with us today is our Commission's extraordinary staff. We have Executive Director Ethan Rarick, Deputy Executive Director Tamar Foster, Project Managers Crystal Beckham and Tristan Stein, and Analyst Sherry McAllister, Ashley Hurley, and Rachel Mattioli. Sorry about that. As typical with our hearings, we'll do some housekeeping before we turn to our topic today. So commissioners' audio and video will be turned on throughout the hearing, and you may mute yourself if you wish. If you remember to unmute yourself if you wish to make a comment or ask a question during the hearing. The video and audio of our hearing witnesses will be turned on when it is their turn to speak. Members of the public will be muted during the hearing. We will have a public comment session at the end of the hearing if you'd like to speak at that time. Those who wish to make a comment will be unmuted during the public comment session at the end of our hearing. If you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom by clicking on the hand icon to join our comment queue. Those of you who have joined by phone may either dial *9 to raise their hand on Zoom or send an email to littlehoover@lhc.ca.gov indicating you would like to address the commission. You must provide the phone number from which you have joined the meeting so our staff knows who to unmute. Staff will be monitoring raised hands and emails and requesting comment throughout the duration of our hearing. As is usual in our commission hearings, public comment is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and we will be monitoring that. We're recording today's hearing. After the hearing, staff will place a permanent link to the recording on our website and upload it on our YouTube channel and Facebook page. Welcome to the social media world. And now to the substance of today's hearing. This is the second of 3 commission hearings on how to strengthen the state and local relationship to increase the supply of affordable housing in the state of California. Currently, California is not on track to meet its goal of 1.8 million new housing units between 2015 and 2025. Partnerships between the state and local governments are a crucial aspect of increasing the affordable housing supply and helping California meet its ambitious housing goals. Our study will consider this state and local relationship and examine how California, particularly the Department of Housing and Community Development, can work within this relationship to facilitate the creation of affordable housing across the state. Today, representatives from local government will share their perspectives on increasing affordable housing in their communities. 2 weeks from today, we will hold our third and final hearing on the state and local relationship, where we will be joined by state housing officials. And I'd like to welcome Commissioner Dion Erner, who just joined us as well.
Thank you.
This hearing was organized by Project Manager Crystal Beckham. And I'd like Crystal to introduce our first witness.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Our first witnesses are Robert Phipps, Deputy Director with the Fresno Council of Governments, and Michael Sigala, Principal, Sigala Incorporated. Robert and Michael, when you're ready, please unmute yourself and begin your presentation.
Good morning. Good morning, commissioners. I'm sorry there was a lag there. Can everybody hear me okay? Are we on?
We can.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you for having us. My name is Robert Phipps with Fresno Council of Governments. I manage the Regional Early Action Planning Program for the San Joaquin Valley region, the 8 counties of the San Joaquin Valley. I'm joined today by Michael Sigala, who is our consultant program manager for that same program known as REAP. So today we're going to talk to you about the issues and barriers for creating housing in the San Joaquin Valley, as well as some recommendations that we have for establishing some permanent solutions. Just by way of a bit of background, The San Joaquin Valley is slightly different from some of the more urban areas of the state that have been more pronounced, whose situations with regard to affordable housing have been more pronounced, and homelessness in particular in the media. In that, for the San Joaquin Valley, land availability, permitting, zoning, these typically are not the issues that we're seeing in the San Joaquin Valley, and of course we're going to go more into that. But it's kind of a different set of problems that I will allow Michael to elaborate on. So, Michael.
Thank you, Robert. Good morning, commissioners. A few things. Robert mentioned lack of affordable housing across all sectors. That's no different from other regions of California. Our local jurisdictions are a little bit different. We only have 4 jurisdictions with a greater population than 150,000, 2 greater than 100,000, and about 66 cities, more or less 64 cities with population less than 100,000. So a lot of small cities in the San Joaquin Valley, not any local fundings to support major housing projects. Staffing, a lot of cities do not have planners on staff to facilitate housing, or the housing knowledge or motivation to facilitate public-private partnerships, for example, to develop housing. And then lastly, we do not have a plethora of affordable housing developers willing to do things here in the San Joaquin Valley, like in other large regions of the state. Land availability and land use approvals versus implementation. What I mean by that is permitting, land use approvals, CEQA, not as big of an issue in terms of timeline or cost in the San Joaquin Valley as in other regions, versus the lack of local funding to support projects. So in terms of the role of HCD in housing in our region, we obviously would like to see more of a focus on capital versus permitting, because I think we have our permitting taken care of for the most part. It's not too hard to get projects approved here. Lack of higher income jobs to support housing. Obviously, that's a big problem for us here in our region. Economic development in conjunction with additional housing would help solve some things here. And then lastly, I wanted to note how complex affordable housing is. I'm a board president also of a nonprofit that develops affordable housing, and affordable housing production is one of the most complex, riskiest, expensive, time-consuming thing you can do in terms of real estate development. So we're left with a world that is made up of affordable housing developers. Then you have your private sector market rate developers. And so getting private sector involved is one of our recommendations for you today that I'll elaborate on in a second.
And when you, Michael, if you would, when you combine that complexity of the affordable housing, especially the affordable housing grant process, with the earlier point about staffing and a lack of housing knowledge, that's kind of this perfect storm of frustration, right? Because we've had interest, for example, through REAP, in things as elemental as can you help us develop a housing element? That is the level of staffing that we're dealing with in some of these jurisdictions, that they've never gone through a full housing element cycle in the past, and they're asking for assistance from the Valley-wide partnership to do that. I'm sorry, Michael. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so some of our recommendations would include, well, first I want to say working with HCD has been good for us. We think that, they're doing a good job and they have a lot of programs, obviously, and they have a lot of funding, but obviously there are some improvements to be made, but I just wanted to start off on that foot in terms of HCD. One of our recommendations is reduce the complexity that I just noted. I mean, if you apply for an AHSC program or a multifamily housing program with HCD, and you're looking at 250 tasks covering 1,000 pages of documents for an application, very complex. And then there's always a big local funding requirement. And again, we don't have local funding in the San Joaquin Valley, especially post RDA. And then reimbursement requirements prevent a lot of our cities from participating an HCD program. So HCD says, you know, you can have $100,000 to do this planning exercise, but you need to cough up the money first, and then we'll reimburse you. Sometimes that reimbursement can take a year. Our cities do not have $100,000 to participate in activities sometimes. So that's always going to be an issue. And then again, focus on implementation versus planning, which I already mentioned. Capital money is more needed than planning money in terms of HCD.
And I don't know that we can overstate the degree to which you know, the gutting of redevelopment impacted affordable housing in the San Joaquin Valley. I mean, that was the conduit that, you know, for affording affordable housing in the San Joaquin Valley, and you know, the distinction is very stark without it.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Phipps, this is Sean Varner, and I wanted to just interject right there real quickly. You had indicated that the gutting of redevelopment, but have you seen any implementation of this new statutory schemes that have taken legs at all, or are they not helping?
As Michael indicated, Commissioner, in the largest 4 cities, yes, you know, but again, out of 62 cities, we have 4 that are over 150,000 in population. And so there has been some success in those 4 cities with regard to programs like AHSC, you know, that again, where they have the planning staff that can handle the complexity of the applications.
Mm-hmm.
And just, I'm going to channel Pedro Nava real quickly. Commissioners may interject during the conversation here, and if they do so, it's because you've piqued the commissioner's interest in wanting to have a discussion on the matters that you're testifying about.
So on that note, Mr. Varner, I have a couple questions, Vice Chair Varner. A few questions. You said that CEQA really isn't a problem. Is that just because nobody's suing you over it, or but are the documents getting more difficult to do, and is that a challenge?
I think there's been a lot of carve-outs over the year for housing and streamlining affordable housing, and I just, you know, we've talked to jurisdictions and they haven't really indicated that was a big issue for them. The biggest issues for them are infrastructure, local funding, and lack of developers. They didn't really, we did a survey of all our jurisdictions. They did not mention CEQA being a problem. And we have talked, Robert and I have talked to city planners, and they are trying to do some workarounds on CEQA to help even more, but it didn't seem like that was that big of an issue for them.
Interesting. I mean, I know that Governor Brown tried to do that by right legislation to deal with CEQA. Maybe it's certainly different in my jurisdiction. I'm in Los Angeles, and we get quite a bit of CEQA activity here. Right. The other question is on when you talk about the requirements, the reimbursement requirements. Is there like a percentage that, you know, if the state's going to put up 50%, you have to put up 50%. How does the local funding, how does that work?
Any state funding requirement typically is reimbursed. There are exceptions. We have REAP got half its money up front, and that made a ton of difference. It allows us to do things. But for the most part, it's reimbursed, and a 50% mix isn't typical. It's mostly 100% reimbursable or not. And so, but that, I think that would help. Anything would help.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I proceed?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so our last set of recommendations here, thank you for this opportunity again, is we think, in our humble opinion, the demand for affordable housing outstrips the ability for us to fund it, us collectively to fund affordable housing at $500,000 a door, and that will never meet the demand by putting more money into affordable housing. I think we need to incentivize the private sector a little bit here. We welcome the money in affordable housing, don't get us wrong, but the private home builders, especially in the San Joaquin Valley, are the ones producing a lot of the housing. In the Bay Area in the past, when I used to live and work there, I know 80% of the new multifamily housing production was built as affordable housing by affordable housing developers, and definitely not the case here in the San Joaquin Valley. So our first recommendation is on condos. Again, this has been studied for 20 years already. Lack of condo development. You see condos in the coastal areas. We did our jurisdictional surveys. I can't point to one city who has a condo project under construction. So condos offer density, they offer home ownership, wealth. They hit a lot of the right issues in terms of solving the state's problems. But there's no condo construction in the valley, and it has to do with, and I'm not an expert in this, but my understanding, construction defect liability insurance has hindered condo production up and down the state for a while. It's expensive to get. Sometimes you can't get it. And then builders don't want to get into the class action lawsuit litigation that comes with it. So in our humble opinion, maybe the state provides workman's comp insurance. It provides fire insurance. Perhaps it could look at providing construction defect liability insurance. And if the state was able to do that, it would unleash the private sector building condos, especially in the San Joaquin Valley. Because I've talked to a lot of builders, and for that reason, they don't build condos. So I think that would be something to look at. I did have Cal FHA's ear on this for a while. They were looking into it. So I think it's something to continue to look at. If you Google it, you'll find people have been talking about it for 20 years in California. So maybe there's some time to do something about it. Our next recommendation pertaining to single family construction, lots of new single family coming up in the valley, all private sector. I know there was a focus on home ownership for this commission as well. Inclusionary housing is not booming in the San Joaquin Valley. I'm not saying all of our cities need it. A lot of our poor cities cannot handle inclusionary housing. It would disincentivize the private sector from investing there, but some of our cities can. And I think if there was some sort of pilot program where mortgage assistance could be provided to participants in inclusionary housing projects, that would entice the private sector to be okay with it, to build new single family developments with some of the units set aside for low income families. I think through some sort of mortgage assistance pilot that would allow HCD to incentivize and encourage cities to adopt inclusionary zoning or housing ordinances might be a path to getting more private sector involvement. And then lastly, some prevailing wage exemptions could help. I know this is a big uphill battle. Prevailing wage is important. We believe in it. We believe in paying our workers high wages, but at the same time, prevailing wage prevents the private sector from its involvement in any type of affordable housing. So I'll point to the city of Fresno, downtown city of Fresno. There was a builder who probably built 15 projects, 1,000 units, all mixed income with redevelopment and low mod housing funds. The reason why they did it in that formula was because there was a carve out in Labor Code 1720 that said if redevelopment low mod housing funds were the only public funds in a housing project, it is exempt from state prevailing wage. So that exemption in the past unleashed the private sector to develop very creative and nice mixed income projects in our urban cores. So if there was some way to allow some type of exemptions, you would see more private sector development of the type of denser housing that the state wants and that we all want in our urban cores. So those are some of our recommendations, not all, but we just thought we'd enlighten you with some information from the San Joaquin Valley. So once again, I appreciate you allowing us to do so.
And to Michael's point, the very last point there, for example, in Fresno, a housing authority project now, he mentioned per door, a Fresno County Housing Authority project now is about $350,000 per door. So that is what is considered affordable housing construction, and so
that's cheap compared to other regions.
Right.
I see that Commissioner Schwamberger has unmuted, so I assume she has a question.
Yeah, thank you both for your testimony and information. You talked about the complexity, and I just wanted to hear a little bit more about that. I heard the incredible paperwork. Can you be a little bit more specific about the complexity that serves as a deterrent for the affordable housing?
Sure. I mean, I'll point to others, my participation in other state programs as well. I mean, we needed a programmer from China to do a budget sheet for a grant application, a PhD person from China, because the the requirement was so complex. And I understand these are big projects. You cannot give $15 million to a $30 million project and not expect rigorous underwriting. But maybe you can do that after a threshold is passed. So maybe the applicant doesn't have to do 250 things, spend $250,000 and produce 1,000 pages of documents for an application. Maybe they do 1/10 of that, get through the first door, and then start doing more of that. But to have applicants for HSC, for example, or MHP, do all of that work up front with little or no guarantee for an oversubscribed programs, it's really hard. I mean, to do an AHSC application, and I did one, and we were awarded for a city. You have to spend 6 months minimum, 2 to 3 people, almost full time. You have to spend $250,000, and you have to do a ton of work just to be able to enter the arena.
Again, by way of example, Fresno Council of Governments has a technical assistance program that we've had to offer our jurisdictions, wherein we hire consulting firms to bring in to assist the jurisdictions in their applications, and also to provide modeling support, for transportation modeling support, land use modeling support for those applications. So yes, it is a very, very complex Byzantine process.
Thank you.
Commissioner Erner.
So is the complexity demanded all by the state, or are there other jurisdictions, so that this 1,000-page document, is it all because of state requirements? And are
yes.
Okay, so
you have to have your land use approvals, for example, in a project, and that's very complex, as you know. You need land use and environmental done, but for the most part, that's one of the 250 requirements of the state. Yes.
Okay, so it's not that local jurisdictions or somebody else puts requirements on it, that at the state level, it's the state's requirements, and I'm presuming it's pursuant to statutory language.
I think it's pursuant to underwriting guidelines of HCD, yeah. But I think there's some flexibility in the program guidelines to maybe not be so onerous up front. There are certain, even affordable housing developers who are burnt out. I mean, they didn't apply last round for HSC because the other 3 applications before that were so overwhelming. They had no more gas in the tank.
Gotcha. And then the other question that I have is, there's all this new federal dollars, and we're all reading about them in the newspapers, right? And the fact that only 10% of the dollars have actually been spent. Tell us a little bit about how that plays out in the Valley, if it is at all, because it's, I gather it's kind of twofold. It's about housing, but it's also about relieving us of the homeless population in some way. In other words, getting them housed. Is this playing out at all? Is anybody talking about this? Is anybody applying for it? What's the problem in getting it out?
Are you talking about the CARES Act money, cities, or I don't know what?
There's I can't tell you which.
I think I do. I mean, obviously there's been a lot of funding, right? CARES Act is one stream. Yeah, that's the most recent stream. Okay. I can tell you again, just anecdotally. So the city of Fresno did spend, I believe it was upwards of $12 million, I want to say, on through project either Room Key or Home Key for homeless housing, and specifically hotel conversion, purchasing hotels that they did run through their allocation. I can only speak to the city of Fresno on this because it was in local media accounts. So I know that there was a big effort specifically along freeway embankments to pull homeless people from freeway embankments. Something like I want to say 400 individuals accepted housing offers from that. I don't know if I have that number quite right. But with regard to CARES Act, I think that has been focused specifically on rental assistance. Is that what you're? Okay, and
because I don't know. I mean, I thought it was for both, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, I think that in terms of, I think that there is some funding that is available and is being provided. I mean, through what we are euphemistically calling REAP 2.0, which is part of the latest budget bill AB 128 that is going through and I guess is also going through some cleanup legislation. There is an additional $500 million that will be coming through metropolitan planning organizations like Fresno COG, like MTC, who I believe is up next on your witness list. And that money is for implementation. And so that is a very good step. And that is coming out of, I believe, out of CARES Act money, that is coming out of federal money. But that does present an additional issue, which is procurement. So now, it's a good problem to have. But whereas REAP, what came out of the state budget and was administered through HCD, it did not have the federal procurement issues. We will have that with the CARES Act funds. So that is going to extend the timeline for expenditure. But with regard to the rental assistance issues, one of the hurdles specifically has been that the renters themselves must apply and certify for that, and it's kind of a partnership between the tenant and the landlord, who must jointly apply, and that has presented, as I understand it, some procedural hurdles to getting that money out. And so yes, you're correct, Commissioner, that has slowed the process considerably. People aren't aware of number one, the hurdle of not being aware of the program. Number two, confusion over how to apply for it, because so much of it is being directed online, and people want to, they're not necessarily familiar with the online environment or how to complete applications online. They want to make phone calls, they want to talk to somebody live, and that's not how this is being rolled out.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got Commissioner Emerson, then Commissioner Schwamberger.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. A question about the prevailing wage change for low-income housing. Was that a legislative action or administrative action that changed that?
Well, yes, sir. There was no change. It was just that redevelopment disappeared. So you couldn't, local cities don't have that funding available to use that safe harbor in the prevailing wage law. So
the carve out is still there for
the carve out is still there. Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I misunderstood. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Mr. Schwamberger?
Yeah. So my question, we hear and we know that statewide demand for housing is far outpacing supply. In your area, in the San Joaquin Valley, is that true for all types of housing, or are there some aspects of housing where there is enough supply? Can you break that down a little bit for us in terms of, where you have the biggest issues in terms of demand outpacing supply?
That's a great question. I think it would mirror the state overall, all types of housing, especially very low income. We have a homeless issue here, but I think, multifamily units for very low income, disabled, veterans, seniors, and families is on our list.
Yeah, I mean, there is single family housing being built, but it's market rate. Everybody's shooting at market rate in terms of the developers, right? That it's all market rate housing, and that's being snapped up because with the as you've probably read, with COVID and the telecommute situation, the rearranging of the workforce, if you will, the valley has become much more attractive to especially Bay Area, Los Angeles, commuters, former commuters who now have the option of being able to telecommute from here on out, and so have sought cheaper housing, and been able to leverage their working dollar much more effectively by coming inland. And so that has kept the pace of market rate housing high, and so I think actually causing the affordable housing crisis to worsen.
Is there anything in your area or at the state level that stands in the way of even the market rate housing keeping pace with demand?
Well, I would say right now, of course, it's everything again that you've read about. Material costs, lumber up 300%, fixtures, all the associated material costs with construction, lack of labor, labor costs rising. So yeah, I mean, we're suffering, the same shortages that everyone, which of course is not just limited to California either.
But infrastructure too. I mean, that's a big thing. A lot of cities cannot approve a new project because there's no infrastructure to support it.
When you say, what do you mean, Michael, about which aspect of infrastructure?
A sewer system could be at capacity, a water system could be at capacity. They have to annex land to bring it in. And then someone needs to cough up the billions of dollars to extend a water and sewer line a half a mile down the city sphere. Yeah.
And then most recently, I mean, agreed, this is not prevailing, but most recently, just this past summer, we have communities in Tulare County, unincorporated communities that whose wells have dried up. They don't have any water, literally have no water for the existing population. And so, yeah, it's pretty dire in certain corners of the valley.
Thank you.
All right, do we have any other questions? All right, well, Mr. Phipps, Mr. Sigala, this has been very important testimony and information for us to use in our study. So really appreciate you taking time out with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. We appreciate you having us.
All right, Crystal.
Thank you. Our next witness is Heather Peters, who is the Principal Regional Housing Planner for the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and Association of Bay Area Governments. Welcome, Heather, and when you're ready, please unmute yourself and begin your presentation. And I believe staff is going to run her PowerPoint slideshow for her.
Just before I get started, an audio check. Can you hear me?
Yes, I could hear you.
Ms. Peters, I think we're getting a little bit of feedback on two different, it looks like you've got a phone and your screen. So if maybe just use one audio.
Yeah, is this better?
Yes.
Yes,
yep,
that works.
Better. Okay, excellent. Thank you. If I can have my slides, please. Good morning, commissioners, and thank you for inviting me to testify today. This is very important work, and I'm very proud to be a part of it. Can I have the next slide, please? I'll begin with some context, and this slide summarizes my experience in implementing housing policies at various levels of the government. I served as the Deputy Secretary for Housing under Governor Schwarzenegger and Brown from 2007 to 2012. While I was at the state, I oversaw many housing policies and funding programs run by HCD and by CalHFA. Next, I served at the local level at San Mateo County. And currently, as you've heard, I'm serving at the regional level. This slide is also helpful to visualize the magnitude of the difference in resources available at different levels of government. It's important to note that land use authority rests at the local level where resources are most scarce. Today, I'll be talking to you about what I call clearing the weeds. It's not sexy, but there are a lot of opportunities for governments at all levels to better leverage their resources to create an overall system of funding, planning, and permitting that sets up housing builders for success. Next slide, please. The one thing that became very apparent to me when I moved from states to local government is even the most well-intentioned grant funding alone may not have the intended impact, depending on things like size of the grant, length of funding, size of local staff, and a lot of the things that you heard from our prior speakers. Technical assistance and staffing support together with the funding can turbocharge it. And HCD is terrific at providing both. However, housing funding, including funding for planning grants and technical assistance, is notoriously inconsistent. Fortunately, recently, the legislature has been very generous with 3 different housing planning grants that you see here, totaling approximately $75 million for the Bay Area. And this year, an additional $100 million that Robert mentioned as LEAP 2.0 is expected to come to the Bay Area. Now, all of this money is what I call a good problem to have, but it's still a problem. HCD is already currently administering over 1,000 separate funding agreements on the programs that you see on the screen. And they will need to administer even more with the new funding. Local staff, especially in smaller cities, as you heard, can have a great deal of trouble applying for money, even if it's earmarked for them. HCD has spent an extraordinary amount of staff and consulting time just trying to get local jurisdictions to take the money. It sounds counterintuitive. I mean, like, who doesn't want free money? But accessing grant fund overtaxes local planning staff, as you've heard. It's a lot of work to take free money, and it's much easier to accept free technical assistance. Inconsistent funding is also a staffing challenge for HCD. Without a permanent source of funding, they cannot build a team that's dedicated solely to delivering technical assistance. The same staffers who are currently providing technical assistance are also reviewing the local housing elements for compliance with state laws and handling other core duties. My greatest fear is when the current funding runs out, we risk losing the great momentum that HCD has built with local government. Next slide, please. Despite these significant administrative challenges, HCD has been a tremendous partner to local government, stretching limited funding very far to provide TA that's prioritized by the local jurisdictions who know best what their communities need. It's also given us the opportunity to collaborate across the state. Robert and I would not have otherwise had opportunity to be in conversation with each other from Central Valley to the Bay Area. But the REAP funding, LEAP, and SB2 funding provides us a monthly meeting space to share best practices. This slide shows just some of the synergies that we've been able to achieve with REAP funding. Next slide, please. ABAG's program design for its REAP funding mirrors the funnel that I showed at the beginning of the presentation. It focuses on leveraging state, regional, and local funding. We provide resources at 3 scales to complement the state technical assistance. We have local, over-the-counter, and competitive grants, as well as access to a bench of pre-qualified consultants. You heard how much trouble procurement can be. Our sub-grants are easy to apply for. We literally use SurveyMonkey, and we combine the application with federal planning grant funding for greater impact. Local jurisdictions can also choose to leave their funding on account with ABAG, and we will handle the paperwork with them to get the consulting help they need. With this format, we were able to achieve 100% participation with very little time staff wasted chasing people begging to take our money. We also established what we call county collaboratives. These are county-based work groups that are staffed by a paid planning consultant to provide housing technical assistance and to facilitate shared learning amongst planners to share best practices and collectively problem solve. We're also establishing peer cohorts of jurisdictions with similar planning challenges, regardless of where they're located. For example, small agricultural towns and big cities. We're also providing regional technical assistance, which includes robust data tools, community engagement in multiple languages, traditional trainings, and topic-specific work groups. I want to note that throughout this presentation, you'll find links on the slides for more information, like the one at the bottom of this slide. Next slide, please. Next, I'm going to preview what can be accomplished with dedicated data scientists on staff and with funding to implement innovative software solutions at scale. There are a lot of these, so I'm going to breeze through them pretty quickly to save a lot of time for Q&A. But again, there are links on most of these slides for more information. Next slide, please. This is an online tool that was built by MTC's in-house data scientists that allowed policymakers and the public to visualize potential distribution of housing obligations known as RHNA. Users could weigh different factors such as proximity to jobs or transit or opportunity in good schools and amenities, and to immediately see where the housing densities would result and toggle the different inputs to get the results that they wanted. Next slide, please. MTC's data scientists also took on the task of regionally producing standardized data packets for each of our 109 local Bay Area jurisdictions. This is required by HCD, and honestly, it's not rocket science. It's collecting a bunch of readily available statistics through the census and other data sources. But it is incredibly time-consuming and expensive if each jurisdiction tries to independently locate it, assemble, and visualize over these 60 data points. These data packets have been pre-reviewed by HCD for compliance with state law in requiring data for local housing plans. Accordingly, the packets are also saving HCD staff time when they review the local housing elements produced through ABAG. They'll be able to recognize this format and know that it's been compliant. Next slide, please. This is another custom tool created by MTC's in-house data scientists. This one is still under development, but it allows local planning staff to visualize all of the parcels in their jurisdictions in the context of various factors that can influence housing planning decisions, such as if the parcel is publicly owned, or if it's near transit, or if it's near natural hazards. It's important to note that while new planners are graduating from school with really strong data skills, many local jurisdictions cannot afford the software licensing fees for tools like GIS and rely on highly paid consultants for data analysis needed instead. Our tool pre-screens each and every site against a plethora of state housing laws, especially the new state housing laws. It flags potential compliance problems, it makes policy suggestions, and additionally, it allows planners to select the sites that they want to include in their state-required housing inventory, and then it pre-populates most of HCD forms. Again, this is not sexy, but it is transformational for local governments. Together, these data tools are conservatively estimated to have saved local jurisdictions in the Bay Area over $3 million already, and enhancements continue to be made. MTC is happy to share its computer code with the state and other regions. However, it is absolutely dependent on accurate underlying data about each parcel, including zoning information and existing uses. Our quote base map was painstakingly assembled by MTC staff over years, sometimes by reviewing PDFs of zoning maps, reading and interpreting lengthy ordinances. The good news is local jurisdictions can now log in and they can update the underlying data themselves if they change zoning for parcels or have other corrections or updates. The base map at MTC and ABAG doesn't just inform our housing policy. It can now also be used for transportation planning, resilience planning, and much more. Next slide, please. This is some innovative software that we purchased using REAP funds from a company called City Innovate that allows our local jurisdictions to easily search and browse the qualifications of a multitude of planning consultants that we have qualified to serve on our regional planning bench. It's interesting to note that in procuring this, we also qualified them under the federal standards that were mentioned by the prior speakers. It streamlines procurement, it tracks grant spending, and it automates some of our REAP reporting to HCD. I like to say that this is like Bay Area jurisdictions using an A-bag gift certificate to shop in our consultant mall. Next slide, please. This is some software that we purchased from using REAP funds from a company called Balancing Act that allows members of the public to give input on housing decisions in multiple languages on the types and locations of where they want future housing units in their community. Next slide, please. This is an online portal developed by San Francisco that we will be rolling out throughout the Bay Area. It allows low-income residents to easily search for affordable housing units and submit one standardized application online instead of visiting each location in person and applying on paper, often annually. Next slide, please. Finally, I want to share that the REAP funds have allowed us to build a TA delivery infrastructure. This includes our partnership with HCD and their limited funding for housing technical assistance and staff, as well as our regional planning collaboratives where we meet regularly. The format has become so popular that other non-housing technical assistance programs are using it in the region to share information. For example, our Byrne program is sharing information about energy-saving technical assistance and grants. Next slide, please. We are about to launch this integrated technical assistance plan module website where planners can access information about every aspect of planning, housing, transportation, resilience, and more technical assistance that's available at the regional level. What's nice about this format is that a user can come to find one type of technical assistance and stumble on a whole plethora of other programs and grants that can help them. Next slide, please. Finally, I'd like to leave you with these recommendations, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions. Number one, create permanent technical assistance and data visualization teams within HCD. Jurisdictions that can afford to spend a ton of money on consultants to help them visualize data and formulate policies are in great shape. But jurisdictions with fewer resources for these tools are at a significant disadvantage. Providing these services at the state level would even the playing field, provide transparency, and better inform legislation and ultimately save money. Number two, explore administrative assistances in grant making. We've heard a lot about this. I don't have the answer, but it's worth having a dedicated exploration effort. Three, flex the state's purchasing power on GIS and permitting software. Every consumer knows that you get better pricing when you buy in bulk, and this is no different. A statewide electronic permitting platform could automatically report much of the data on housing production that is now inefficiently manually reported to HCD with very consistency and make it easier for builders to move their projects fast through the pipeline. Four, digitize the base map. This is perhaps the least sexiest proposal, but it has almost limited potential to better inform public policy, increase public transparency, and ultimately save money. Now, how would we do that? How would we get this government into the current century? Number five, building planning capacity at the local level by embedding fellows. I'd like to lift up a program in Massachusetts called the Transformative Development Initiative that embeds fellows, state-funded fellows, in local governments to help them reach their development goals. The fellows bring a network of subject matter expertise and augment staff. As you heard our prior speaker mention, redevelopment is a tremendous loss. And these fellows could provide some of those services without reinstituting a whole government program. In addition to providing better development projects, this program provides training for a diverse group of future planners across the state, and it also acts as an economic stimulus. Finally, consider coordinating TA across state agencies. The state has noble and lofty goals of integrating planning of housing and transportation and infrastructure that are all important to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, preserve open space, and so much more. Taking a whole of government approach to technical assistance and coordinating resources against not just in HCD, but across the state would help us all work together to reach those goals. That concludes my prepared remarks, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Ms. Peters, for your testimony. Are there any commissioners that have questions for Ms. Peters? Commissioner Schwamberger?
Yeah, thank you for that. That looks like some really novel and innovative solutions that you've been developing and implementing that can really streamline a lot of what we're talking about. You know, a lot of what we've been hearing is that, you know, there are so many complexities, you know, laws that are in place, but maybe aren't working, lack of accountability at the local level, you know, other sort of, you know, government sort of obstacles, NIMBYism that, you know, stands in the way of, you know, housing at the local level, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Do you see that as well? Or do you feel like if we apply the technological solutions, we increase capacity at the local level and provide that technical assistance, do you see those as the obstacles for supply meeting demand, and all these other things are hunky-dory and we just need to kind of, or is it, because if some of these things you've talked about could be implemented more broadly, I mean, if that gets us to town, you know, with our housing supply, that would be wonderful. And I'm just wondering if you see some other kind of institutional obstacles, you know, with state laws, with HCD activities, with local accountability, and some of those other things.
Yeah, I wish this was the solution and we just got software and it was done. But like I said, there are, like, everybody has so many multitudes of problems. Some of these things, and particularly I'd like to speak to the NIMBYism on this. Some of these tools are really helpful in particular, that balancing act tool of expanding the voices in the room. Traditionally, you know, public comment is taken at City Hall on Tuesday night and in English. And this tool is really expansive to allow people to log on whenever it's convenient for them and interact in their native language. And then it gives local elected officials political cover to push back against those NIMBYs and say, we got 3,000 comments from local folks across the spectrum of income and ethnicity. And here's what the community writ large wants. Also on, you know, a lot of these technological things, you know, they're making planners' jobs easier. For example, our housing site selection tool. Like right now, there are all these laws, so many new laws, and they're all well-intentioned, SB 35 and streamlining and this and that. A planner still has to learn the laws, understand how they apply to their parcels, and make sure that they comply with them. And that's overwhelming. If you have one planner, some towns even don't have a planner. They haven't outsourced their planning department. These tools can like turbocharge them to be able to say, oh, I see. If in the large, if I change my commercial zoning to include mixed use housing, I get this many more units. It can also really help our legislators make informed decisions. Without the data, we're making informed estimates of the impact of potential legislation. But for SB 9 is a great example. We're not exactly sure whether it's going to have a huge impact or not. But these tools would be able to have staff and the public model and say, what if we made the height limit a little bit higher? How many units would that provide? What if we change the setback? Providing that sort of interactive data informed decision making would be game changing. And reforming CEQA and the prevailing wage issues and so many other things.
Thank you. Maybe along as we're talking here, do you have a sense, and this is, you know, maybe even beyond the Bay Area, are local governments by and large wanting to create more housing, and maybe being, prevented from doing so by, other obstacles or maybe local resistance? Or do you think in some cases, and this, I'm asking for a really general answer, or do you think local governments, by and large, are trying to maintain the status quo, and without some sort of accountability at the state level, we really won't see change? So I'm kind of trying to identify, like, broadly, where maybe the resistance might lie to more housing at the, throughout the state.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it differs widely. As many people as there are on the planet, there are different opinions about housing. And it's the same with local jurisdictions. Some are very pro-housing. There's a new pro-housing designation that HCD is offering that gives them bonus points for funding that technical assistance is being provided on. And others, literally, elected officials have lost their seat for voting for one housing project. Right. So that there's no one size fits all, and you need carrots and sticks. You need accountability, and some of these data tools, as I mentioned, can really, lift up and make transparent where progress is not being made. But the key is one size does not fit all. And HCD is really good when they have the staff and when they have the funding of interacting with us at that regional level and then down at the local level and getting feedback on what works in Los Angeles versus what works in Kotati and what works everywhere in between. So really just giving the HCD the tools and the flexibility to work with local governments to craft solutions, and also having the accountability factors in state laws. It's kind of it's like cooking. You got to get the right pinch of everything.
Well, Ms. Peters, as my fellow commissioners know, you had me at administrative efficiencies and coordinating across state agencies. I think that's really valuable. And I think you might know we did a study not too long ago on the implementation of GIS throughout within the state government. It sounds like you're utilizing some of these tools effectively. And I really appreciate the approach. And I don't know if I've seen this before, looking at the approach of how we make it more efficient within from the local jurisdiction or the government level, as opposed to making it easier for the person that's actually looking to do the housing. And so I think that perspective and the amount of information that these people can have at their fingertips in order to make good decisions on housing and seeing what's going on around them. And I really like the idea of getting community support through the tool of not just the voices that show up at council meetings, but the voices of everybody in the community. I think that could be a powerful tool.
Yeah, and I also want to lift up that the state law is now requiring HCD to have a 10-year data plan for housing. And this is fantastic, and they're working on it. It's much needed. But they need to back that up by permanent staff and permanent funding for the technology. So they don't just say, boy, it would be great if everyone got GIS, but they actually say, here, the state is going to provide this. We're gonna provide it at state scale with buying power at state levels and technical assistance.
Well, great. Are there any other questions? Well, Ms. Peters, thank you so much again for your testimony today. I'm sure if staff has follow-up questions, they'll be in touch with you. And then I will
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Can I ask one more, Commissioner?
Sure.
If you had kind of a magic wand, or were in charge for a day, or maybe I'll give you a week, what might you set up? I mean, I know this is a huge problem. It's hard to say, I would fix A, B, and C, and then we're good. If you had a month, let's say, to kind of be in charge of housing policy for the state of California, to put us on the path of having the housing supply, including affordable, et cetera, better meet the demand. What are the you know, what would you do for that month to kind of, not to maybe fix it in that month, but to, you know, get us on the path to fixing it?
Great question. And I actually was in charge of overseeing state housing policy.
That's true.
For not just a month, but for 5 years. So I can speak to this and say, set up the infrastructure, you know, provide that cross-sector collaboration. You know, we're starting to do it with REAP 2.0, where the legislature is making Strategic Growth Council and our Air Resources Board and HCD and a fourth agency that escapes the OPR, that they're required to cooperate. Put that all together, you know, put all those resources together so that people aren't, you know, acting in silos and you know, just having limited impact. If you have that infrastructure where right now, like every program, they're going to every planning director and saying, please listen, use our stuff. If it could all be in one place and they could go to those planning collaboratives and say, here's a whole menu of stuff we can give you, it would be a game changer. So, you know, coordinate an infrastructure and do a deep dive on the paperwork. Why are we doing it this way? Why is it breaks my heart that HCD has people administering over 1,000 contracts to get this money out. Those people could be giving technical assistance if we got the paperwork done.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I will thank you, Ms. Peters. All. And I will turn this back over to Crystal.
Thank you. Our next witness is Sharon Byrne, who is the Vice President for the United Nations Association of Santa Barbara and Trey counties. Welcome, Ms. Byrne, and when you're ready, please unmute yourself and begin your presentation.
All right, so I think I've been promoted to panelist. Yes, you can all see me here.
Yeah. Yes, welcome.
Thank you very much. All right, I am going to share my screen with you and walk you through kind of a global look. We're going to go kind of much higher here. And hopefully what I'm going to show you is going to reassure you that you are not alone on the world stage, that the problems that California is grappling with are actually happening worldwide. And I want to introduce you to a couple of players that are operating in your housing markets that you might not be attending to. So here we go. So why is the United Nations interested in housing? In the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights, passed by the then brand new United Nations, they include Article 25, which is a human right to housing. And that is Eleanor Roosevelt holding that declaration. Homelessness is now a global problem. I know we tend to think of it as a California and United States problem, but it's actually happening around the world. And it might surprise you who's having the problem. Australia has got a large problem. The United Kingdom has 260,000 people homeless. Canada, 129,000. Amsterdam, Seoul, and Barcelona are all experiencing huge homeless populations for their cities. Obviously, the United States at 540,000 people homeless, with Los Angeles at an incredible rate and New York City. Displacement is what causes homelessness globally. And we're going to show you how people get displaced. So the way the UN looks at housing is that it is stability, it is security, it is human dignity. It should not be a commodity. So in 2000, they appointed a UN special rapporteur on the adequate housing across the world. They took it on themselves to look into why we were seeing global housing shortages. And in 2019, they wrote a very formal letter, which I believe might have been forwarded to you from the United Nations. They wrote it to Blackstone, a massive worldwide investment company that's buying up a lot of housing. And they specifically identified the predatory practices of Blackstone as a major problem in displacing people and transforming housing markets to be far more expensive. So that works in the United States as well. It is not, again, you know, Blackstone operates here, but so do others. Deutsche Bank is a notorious buyer of United States properties, particularly homes. And they have been very, very aggressive in the US market. And various magazines and news media that are focused on financial markets have been identifying this. And it's interesting, they see it as a problem. They definitely think that having a lot of your housing stock owned by investors, foreign and domestic or large investment companies, is a real problem. and that what it's doing is it's driving housing prices higher. So let's look a little bit here. There are 90,000 vacant homes in Los Angeles and 50,000 people experiencing homelessness. There is an anti-eviction mapping project that does a really good job drilling down data as to who owns what and where. This is California. As you can see, the areas of interest for investor-owned housing are Sacramento, San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, not unexpectedly. And who are the big owners that have bought most of the housing that is investor owned in these jurisdictions? And obviously Blackstone ranks right at the top of the list. So let's look a little bit around the world of what's going on, because I think you'll find that some of the same problems that we are focusing on here are being dealt with by other nations and cities. So Barcelona has a housing deficit of 170,000 homes, but they have 450,000 vacant homes. And Barcelona is a very dense city. If you've ever been there, it's lovely. And one of the things that really cropped up for them was in the 2010s, it felt like a lot of their housing stock went to vacation rental. And they got really upset about it. It ushered in kind of a whole new political era there. And so what they've done is they've implemented vacancy taxes and second home taxes. And they've actually started fining people for leaving flats empty. And you can see here to the right, again, who's a major player in Spain right now is Blackstone. So that's one of the things that they've done. That didn't seem to fix it. So they've actually gone further. And their mayor, who is really fierce, has decided that they're going to look at repossessing corporate properties that are left vacant by investors. Berlin. 80% of 4 million Berliners rent their homes. The city tried to rent freeze during the pandemic to stop residents from being forced out, and a federal court in Germany overturned that. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound like something that would happen in the United States? But people have been looking at who owns Berlin that's driving these costs up. And so what's happening there is a lot of investor-owned buildings, and sometimes they're not even in the nice neighborhoods. Again, here's Blackstone operating in the city of Kreuzberg. And what they've been doing is they've been buying these properties. Sometimes they'll do minimal renovations, sometimes not. But they will do no-fault evictions, which we are all very familiar with here, and bring in people that pay 3 times what the former tenants were paying. In London, this is another place where housing has become just ridiculously unaffordable to own. And part of the problem that London identified was, again, foreign investors that were doing buy to leave investments. They would just buy a property, a building, an apartment, a flat, leave it and expect a price appreciation, and then maybe turn it over in the future. A lot of second home investments. This is also a California issue, where there are 46,000 second homes in London, but the government's not even very good at tracking those. Airbnb is also a huge problem, and London is reported to have the largest short-term rental market of any European city, with at least 75,000 units for Airbnb. Going to Asia, Seoul Korea has seen the same housing spike that sounds really familiar to us, their property is now 14 times their average household income, and it has pushed low and middle income families out of the market. It's causing a lot of political upheaval. What you see here is vacant and abandoned homes that are going to be developed into these towers, but you will have to wonder if the residents of these homes are going to ever be able to live in here, or is this going to be much more expensive housing? And Seoul has taken an approach, which is to look at taking something similar that we've been looking at in California. Why don't we look at taking over some hotels, make some studios? Let's see if we can do something to ease this crunch. Their housing prices have risen 50% since 2017. New Zealand also has a horrible homeless crisis and housing crisis. And this is a scene that looks very familiar to those of us in California. They have tried various things to kind of put the brakes on this sort of runaway housing speculative increase in prices. But what's happened is that it's not worked. And they've seen a 30% spike in just this past year. So I think one of the things that we don't look at as much in California, we look a lot on the supply side and on the bureaucratic side, and how do we get housing constructed, but we're not looking at the role that investors are taking in our markets. And this really kind of started in 2008 with the Great Recession. This is when a lot of the major investment firms decided the thing to do would be to buy up housing. And like I've mentioned, Blackstone and Deutsche Bank are 2 of the biggest. The pandemic had an interesting effect of warping and distorting the housing market even further in that it overheated our stock markets. So investors did not want to put more money into an overheated stock market. So they really plowed heavily into housing. And that has made housing markets very speculative now. Everybody here knows stories of people who tried to bid for a home and were immediately outbid, to the tune of, 50,000 more, could not even get near that price. And yeah, a lot of banks and investors are paying straight up cash for these units. So it is a global problem. It is not just unique to California, even though we are feeling the protracted pain of it. Others are there with us. When we do profitizing of housing, we make a lot more displacement. Like I mentioned, families cannot compete against Blackstone and Deutsche Bank. Institutional investors have a habit of using no-fault evictions to displace tenants, and they make higher rents for the new tenants. So lower income families get pushed further and further out, again, something we're very familiar with in California, to afford housing. But some just go to their cars and they're hoping for better conditions. So when we do displacement of people, we also increase homelessness. And that's a big sign something's wrong in our housing market. But as you see, it's wrong in housing markets worldwide. So here's what some jurisdictions are doing to thwart the movement of financialization and privatization of their housing. So I don't know if you know, but Canada has an election coming up this month. It's a federal election. This is the big issue for their election. They've decided that they are going to, or they're promising to ban foreign investment in Canadian homes, and they're going to end the practice of blind bidding, where you don't know what the other bidder bid against you. Holland had a news story today, actually, that they are going to ban the sales of new or recently sold low and mid-price homes to investors for at least 4 years. Berlin, their movement, again, they're having an election this month. They got 350,000 signatures for a referendum named the Deutsche Wohnen referendum, as they have identified Deutsche Bank as their problem. They're looking to seize apartments from corporations that own more than 3,000 units, and they want to turn them over to newly created public housing agencies. London is making a move to ban no-fault evictions. And China recently, in the last month, increased their mortgage rates. They accelerated development of their government subsidized rental housing, and they have placed increasing scrutiny on developers and investment firms with an eye to the newly listed homes. So in the US and California, we've kind of, in this session, you probably know that Senate Bills 9 and 10 passed last week in the Assembly. And this was a very contested part of legislation, piece of legislation, both of them. They were aimed at gently increasing density by allowing either 4 units on a single family lot split into 2 lots, or allowing up to 10 to 14 units on a single family lot. And a lot of this was draped in rhetoric where it went very polarized very quickly, right? There were some that said single family zoning is just racist. There are other people who said, well, great, that's great, but we're not having a luxury housing crisis. And that seems to be a lot of what gets built. There were questions from communities about, hey, what about climate change and our resources and water? Where are we going to get that if we're going to just densify our neighborhoods? And there was kind of an attitude, especially in the Twitter sphere, when things got really polarized of, just build more, it'll trickle down. And the feeling was, no, it's not going to. And the polling on this was wildly unpopular, with 60 to 75% of people opposed to Senate Bill 9 and 10. Now, the governor is doing some great things on this front, right? So Project Home Key and Room Key, this is policy genius, taking buildings that went dead in the pandemic, which were hotels, repurposing them, using them to house our people experiencing homelessness. That was brilliant. He's done a historic and precedent-setting investment of $12 billion of this year's budget into housing and homelessness. The state has eviction moratorium that went beyond what feds allowed during the pandemic. We did pandemic stimulus funds to our neediest families, rental assistance to help keep people housed. And there are legislative bills on his desk. There are some that are good, some that are not great, but we can do better. So we are the world's 5th largest economy. It would be natural that we are feeling the pain that the rest of the world is feeling on the housing front. It would be astonishing if we weren't. Isn't there an opportunity here to maybe pull all the stakeholders really from across the spectrum together and thoughtfully consider possible solutions that would work best for California? I know that this committee is very focused on that, and I'm very grateful that you have taken this interest. So there's sort of 3 policy buckets of solutions that we can look at. One is, let's just start to protect our people. Let's recognize housing as a human right. Some countries have written this into their constitution. We are not one of them. Families and residents really need to be given first priority in bidding for a home. I don't know how we make that happen, but somehow or another, we have to mute or mitigate the effect of the institutional investor, just straight out overbidding everyone who's trying to get into a home. We need to strengthen mitigation provisions and our no-fault evictions. I believe right now we have 1 month of relocation assistance. My city, Santa Barbara, does 2 months of relocation assistance. We need to mandate mitigation for any development that's going to displace current residents. Every time we take over, some dilapidated housing and we decide we're going to build luxury units on it, where do those residents that were living there go? Where's the housing for them? Second bucket of solutions is to curb the impacts of the institutional investors. And there are countries like you've seen that are trying this. So you can look at banning foreign investment in domestic homes. We could look at second home and vacancy taxes and fines. Barcelona and Vancouver have both implemented these, and they use the money to fund affordable housing. If we would just take vacation rental off the market, we would have done an immediate return of supply of housing to the market. Workforce housing, Aspen did this, and I think it's brilliant. Every time you build a luxury home in Aspen, you're required to put money into workforce housing. Why? Because your luxury home created demands for workers and they need to live somewhere. So cities could fund workforce housing projects with fees like this. And the final bucket of solutions is how do we get to the supply side? How do we get to more of the affordable housing? And there were some very good things that came through in the pandemic that we really liked. So Senate Bill 15 was a great bill. I'm not sure it's going to survive, but it allowed you to take a dead big box retail store like a dead Best Buy. We have 3 of them in Santa Barbara, a Sears and a Macy's and a Nordstrom. And it would give you sales tax relief and grants to help you build affordable housing in those units. Senate Bill 6 looked for a similar situation for vacant office space. Senate Bill 621, I think, is dead on arrival, but another good idea, converting dead motels into homeless housing. And then I think we need to look at solutions like creating zoning and fast paths for tiny home villages. This is a kind of new area of housing. There are a lot of people that like it. It works really well also for homelessness, but we don't really have zoning that allows it. And we have no neighborhoods that probably want it. And I forgot to mention the first solution here is that we have public lands. They are owned by agencies like our school districts, our state government, some of our cities and counties own public lands. We should require that those be used to develop affordable housing. We have something going on in Santa Barbara where one of our public agencies is planning to develop market rate and luxury homes on their unit. It's a publicly owned lot. It feels like to me it should be used for the betterment of the public. So there you go. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I'm happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Byrne. Did we have any questions from any of the commissioners? I'm not seeing any, so it's very thorough testimony.
So, right.
Oh, we have Commissioner Erner.
So this is fascinating testimony, by the way. Thank you so much for being willing to share it with us. This is the first time I guess I've realized that the housing problem is an international problem, right? I mean, I guess I've always just kind of focused it on the US. And so the question is besides the Blackstones and the Deutsche Bank, I mean, I understand the institutional, that I understand, but are we also having just housing production problem in the world? Is there not enough lumber? Are there problems because of climate change, right? All of these other things that are happening, right? Because I don't, historically in the United States, for example, we didn't start really having a homeless problem that we all noticed, right? There've always been homeless people, all right? During the 1930s, there were, people who rode the railroads, blah, 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 right? But it's starting at around 1980 when the federal government kind of pulled out of housing, if I remember correctly, all of a sudden we started noticing people on the streets. And so, but now you're talking about that it's a worldwide problem, and it's not just, right? And so what are the commonalities across, besides Deutsche Bank, besides the institutions doing this, right? Are there other commonalities of issues, right? I mean, is climate change changing something? The great divide between the rich and the poor, that kind of thing. Are there other commonalities that stand out in regards to why this is happening worldwide?
Yes and no. I mean, obviously the world is huge and there's a lot of diversity in it. So it's totally not one size fits all. But you just noticed, right, that even in an economy like China, where things are very centrally planned, right, and that all aspects of the economy are very much managed, even they are running into this problem where, and their feeling was it's investor-driven speculation that is the root cause of their issue. Looking at Europe in particular, they've long had a model of socialized housing, and it's not quite the same thing as public housing in America, that we have kind of a different definition than they do. But their socialized housing, especially featured mixing of populations, right? And they've, obviously some of these cities are extremely dense. So you sort of run out of the room, right? Which is why I think it's useful to look at some of the repurposing solutions where, you know, the pandemic opened some things up that weren't there before. And obviously that's the route that Seoul Korea is taking, right? Like, let's take hotels and convert them into studios, right? Because that's a place to get housing where there is none today, by repurposing something that maybe doesn't suit what the community needs as much as housing would. And I too am very surprised by the spikes in homelessness across the world. My parents, my family's all British. Typically the UK takes care of you from cradle to grave. So to see so many people sleeping rough, as they call it, is a little shocking, you know, that what is going on. One of the other problems that they have is some of the socialized housing is being bought out and controlled by investors.
Right, well, I think that started under Margaret Thatcher. I mean, Margaret was not, I gather, fascinated by the social housing models that had been developed, I think, after World War I, actually, when the soldiers came back and they needed housing.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
Yeah. And I think too, you know, in all the countries across the world, very similar to what's happened in the United States, you know, I think you probably remember around the 1980s when you were buying a house, the formula was 2.5 times your income. That's what you could afford, right? So you saw from Seoul Korea and other, like when housing moves 14 times away, you know, from your income and your wages don't keep pace, right, which also is a worldwide problem, then yeah, it becomes ever more unaffordable, and you really can't get at the social or the affordable housing tier at the bottom there and build it up fast enough to catch up. You just can't, right? So that's part of the problem too, I think.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I have Commissioner Emerson, then Commissioner Sidley.
In the past, we've always had a lot of discussion about infill housing. Is that still on the horizon for more progress in building in infill areas?
Yeah, I think so. And I think a lot of countries are doing a lot of infill, right? Especially in some of their urban cores. I will say though, one of the things that's a little distressing about the infill and then the density argument is there are two key cities, which is Hong Kong and Vancouver, who both obviously have gone for incredible density, right? You know, you're going to live in a 60-story tower in Hong Kong, right? I mean, that's going to be your sort of only option. And yet they have some of the highest housing prices still in the world. So we're seeing from them some 20 years down the road after the densification, you know, and infill experience, it still didn't drop the price of housing enough. I don't think you can get at it from just a supply side argument. I think you have to get at it from how do you protect your citizens, your residents, your people from being pushed out by forces that don't care about how much you build. I mean, they just don't. And as you can see from very dense cities like London, right, having a huge vacation rental by owner stock is a huge problem for them. Amsterdam has the same problem. And that's another very dense city with zero infill potential at this point, right? Because they've built everything in already.
Thank you.
So my question actually is about the topic that you just touched on, and that is vacation rentals. So how obviously the homeless crisis here in Los Angeles is just growing exponentially. And so I am wondering, based on data, how much of that do we believe is based on, you know, product being taken off the market for these vacation rentals? And then has anyone thought about, I know if you're a hotel, there's hotel taxes, things like that, that people who are renting their home aren't necessarily paying all of that. And if people thought about doing something like, you know, a concept like the taxi medallion, and if you want to rent, you have to get the taxi medallion, And particularly if you are a unit of 4 or less, which is usually what the home would have been, a small apartment or something like that, then, and so you would still have to pay all the other fees. And is anybody even looking at trying to curb some of this vacation rental that's causing some of the problems?
Yeah, very good question. So obviously that's Barcelona's direction, right? Barcelona is going to go very hard in that direction, that they don't like the vacation rental. They're going to put a lot of taxes. A lot of the European cities, that is their first move. If you're going to do a second home, vacation rental, whatever, we're going to jack your tax rate really high. And I think that's fair. You know, if you're monetizing something, right, you know, then and if it's a business, you would pay a lot of business taxes anyway. Why wouldn't you pay it in this regard? So I think that's a fair, you know, way of going about things. And some cities are further along in that than others. Like I say, Vancouver's ordinance is extremely well developed on this. So is Barcelona's. So I think that's one, and Paris is trying something quite similar, but I don't think theirs is as robust. And obviously London needs to get it together. So some cities are trying things like this. I'm not entirely sold that vacation rental is a business model that we should just continue to support and allow. I feel like if we did ban it, that people that are interested in doing that would get extremely creative and build hotels that look like homes, right? So that people would want to rent them out. I'm not confident of that. Where I live in Santa Barbara, we zoned vacation rentals into R4. We do no enforcement. If they don't bother to register for a license, you know, the city basic, and it's fair because there's one poor employee there, right, who says, can you prove to me? Can you show me video? Can you show me the VRB? So you have to do all the investigation yourself as a neighbor. And I will tell you, the neighborhood that I live in was formerly low rent, kind of a working class, really down on its heels kind of neighborhood. And now I'm staring at 6 vacation rentals. Where did the families in those homes go? I don't know, but I know that they can't afford to live here. You know, and my rent doubled as a result over 10 years of living in kind of this upzoned, you know, vacation rental neighborhood. So I'm not convinced vacation rental is good for citizens, good for cities, you know, great for housing. I feel like it's a problematic sharing economy business model that I think's got a lot of kinks to be worked out. And I don't really know anybody who's really on top of their A game on this.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Byrne. I'm not seeing any further questions from commissioners. So thank you very much for your testimony. It was a different perspective and something I think will be valuable to our study. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Ethan, should we look at public comment here?
We should, Mr. Vice Chairman. We should move into the public comment section of the meeting. So Rachel, if you can put those instructions on the screen for members of the public who are attending the meeting. If you wish to make public comment, you may use the raised hand feature in Zoom, or you may send an email to littlehoover@lhc.ca.gov. That address is on the screen now, all one word, littlehoover@lhc.ca.gov. Please include your name and the phone number from which you have joined the meeting so that staff knows who to unmute when it is your turn. In keeping with the Commission's traditional practice, public comment is limited to 3 minutes per speaker. So please limit yourself to 3 minutes per speaker. And with that, I'll ask Rachel if we have any people who have indicated a desire to make public comment.
Yes, right now we've got 2 raised hands. So first up, we've got Tom Manzo. Tom, you may begin your public comment.
Hi, my name is Tom Manzo, and I'm with the California Business and Industrial Alliance, CABIA. It's a trade organization founded in 2017. And our organization has members from a wide variety of industries, and some of them in the building industry. And our main focus has been reforming a law called Paga. And Paga is the Private Attorney General Act, and it authorizes aggrieved employees to file lawsuits to recover civil penalties on behalf of themselves, other employers, and the state of California for labor code violations. The law gives employees in California the right to bring a lawsuit against their employers for any violation of the California Labor Code. In short, it allows employees to step into the shoes of an enforcement agency like the Division of Labor Standards Enforcement to recover civil penalties on behalf of the California Labor Workforce Development Agency, the LWDA. PAGA allows employees to sue for almost every labor code violation, not just serious violations or those dealing with health and safety. Today, Paga claims have grown more than tenfold since the law was created. So how does Paga affect the cost of housing? Simple. Many contractors actually set money aside for Paga lawsuits and confidential demand letters with the mere threat of Paga. These confidential demand letters can cost them $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 or more. And those settlement demands do not include what the contractor has to spend on attorney fees. Some of the top contractors in California have fell victim to Paga, such as companies like D.R. Horton, Swinnerton, Webcor, just to name a few. I've personally spoke with a contractor who employed a total of 5 employees that's dealing with Paga, and this will be devastating to his business of plus over 30 years. We had a recent study where it shows workers get less, half as much, and employees pay more, twice as much. Paga lawsuits are taking twice as long, and then there's additional administrative costs on each settlement. Our study shows that attorneys who file Paga cases are compensated on average more than $405,000 per case. Normally, it costs the same or more to defend the case. Paga is a unique, absorbent housing cost only in California that most are not aware of and has nothing to do with local planning or zoning related issues. Imagine how this impacts the cost of housing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manzo. Appreciate your comment. Rachel, if we can go on to the next public speaker.
Next up, we've got Michael Boyd. Michael, you may begin your public comment.
Mr. Boyd.
Mr. Boyd, there you go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, I just wanted to provide some comments on the previous witness's testimony. I'm a homeowner. I live in Santa Cruz County, and I own a rental property in Sunnyvale. I bought my house in Santa Cruz County in August 2000 for $365,000, and it's currently valued at about $1.49 million. I bought my duplex in Sunnyvale for $220,000 in 1994, and it's currently valued at $2.7 million. I went to the store the other day to buy some drywall to make a repair. Back about 10 years ago, when I went to Home Depot, I could buy a sheet of drywall for roughly $20 before taxes. Currently, it's $100 before taxes for a sheet of drywall. This sort of illustrates the problem that I'm feeling is occurring with the valuation of property, and how and that has a direct effect on homelessness, and it has a direct effect on home ownership. The issue here I'm feeling concerned about is the fact that our interest rates are currently at the lowest historically, yet the valuation is high. What I heard from the previous testimony is this isn't a problem limited to California, but it's a problem worldwide. It appears that there's a problem with the way that the banks in the world are valuing or inflating the value of everything, yet it's not being reflected in the markets, because there is actually deflation going on, not inflation. So my house, I feel confident, is not worth actually 1.49 million. Probably somewhere around 600,000 would be a reasonable value. What is being done by the state to limit this problem of deflation? Why isn't it being addressed? I'm curious to know how we can fix this problem without
Mr. Boyd, I'm afraid your 3 minutes has expired. If you can wrap up quickly, please.
Oh, I'm done. I just would like you to investigate the relationship of this problem to the current banking system, which overvalues everything. And then
thank you, Mr. Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd. Rachel, if we can go on to the next public commenter, please.
Next up, we've got Giovanna Morales-Tildren. Giovanna, you may begin your public comment.
Hello, my name is Giovanna Morales, and I am the Housing Policy Coordinator with Leadership Council. We work with low-income communities of color in the San Joaquin Valley and Eastern Coachella Valley, many of whom live in unincorporated cities. I just wanted to add to the points that Mr. Sigala talked about regarding CEQA, the importance of inclusionary housing and the lack of infrastructure in our rural communities. CEQA is a tool that we use to protect vulnerable communities, and in no way have we found that this is a barrier to develop affordable housing. We have also found that many of the jurisdictions we work in continue to develop housing for above moderate and moderate income levels and have not built any affordable housing in years. Inclusionary housing would provide simultaneous construction of affordable units in these communities. And finally, many of the communities we work in lack the basic infrastructure to sustain new housing construction, but these are the communities that need it the most. Much more attention must be paid to advancing policies to protect low-income renters and homeowners and address their needs for permanent quality affordable housing. And to briefly name a few, just like legal counsel, eviction protections, vacancy decontrol, and rent control. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Morales-Tildren. Rachel, if we can go on to the next speaker.
Next up, we've got Susan Kirsch. Susan, you may begin your public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm the founder of a group called Catalysts for Local Control, and we take a strong stand for the idea that local communities often know best what's needed in their communities. And I want to commend you just on this presentation has been outstanding. And I especially appreciate hearing Sharon Byrne's comments at the end and the importance of looking at what's happening in California from a global perspective of the power of a little bit of money in the hands, or a whole lot of money, I mean, in the hands of fewer and fewer people. You know, one of the great outcomes of the Occupy movement, I think, was that we had this concept of the 1% who are controlling more and more of the assets. So I want to just say a couple of things from my observations of what's happened over the course of the last number of years. That first of all, we had the state disband the redevelopment agencies so that cities no longer had money to be able to do what they really wanted to do for being responsible governors of their own communities. And then the legislators have had the nerve to say the cities are to blame for the housing crisis, when in fact, if they had the money, they would probably be doing a very reputable job as they had been doing when they had funding for affordable housing. So what we have now is that the legislators, year after year, are passing these draconian laws like Senate Bill 9 or 10 this year and other bills in previous years, which further are dismantling the power of local communities to make decisions for their own welfare. So I just want to thank you so much for bringing this up and giving everyone a chance for this broad perspective to look at what the issues are that we're facing around affordable housing, knowing we all, for ourselves, for our children, we want affordable housing for everyone, but knowing that the financial interests that are governing so much of this are having a whole lot of power to be naming the conditions of financial health in America and around the globe. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kirsch. Rachel, do we have other people who've indicated they want to make public comment?
At this time, there are no more raised hands and no emails.
Mr. Vice Chairman, then I think that concludes our agenda for today. If you'd like, I can just remind commissioners that we have another hearing on this topic 2 weeks from today, September 23rd at 10 a.m. when we will be hearing from state officials. We're working now with the Newsom administration and others, and we'll be updating the commission as we confirm speakers for 2 weeks from today.
Sounds good. I want to again thank you, staff, for your extraordinary work on behalf of the commission, and want to thank all the commissioners for volunteering your time, and especially here today and hearing this testimony. And we'll look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Okay.